Welcome back to another UCL Fantasy video. This will be the best Limitless team for Matchday 3, and a lot of you may have used the chip already in Matchday 2 like myself, and as I've always said, for me, between Matchdays 2 and 5 is the best time to use it, and my preference is Matchday 2 or 5 when you've got the back-to-back fixtures of Matchdays 3 and 4 being the exact same, only reversed from home and away. That's why I would rather use the wildcard in such a week, but every team is different, and for those of you going for the Limitless this week, this video will definitely help you. And even if you aren't using it, maybe you want Lewandowski replacements or you're targeting a premium transfer as part of your normal team or wildcard setup, this video will also help you with that as well. And be sure to check out the best wildcard team video and my team selection, the deadline stream next Tuesday. There's a lot of content headed your way for UCL Fantasy and FPL. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes, and we're going to keep on pushing towards 21,000 subscribers and beyond. But without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. I do have Scottish ancestry, by the way, so just putting that out there. So Sommer is going to be the first goalkeeper I'm going to cover today. He's at home to Salzburg, and he is only 4.5 million, and you might have this temptation to just go for the most expensive players in each position on the Limitless, but I still think Sommer is one of the very best goalkeepers in Matchday 3, and ultimately, as I keep on saying in these videos, whether you're playing the Limitless, the wildcard, or your team selection, you need a goalkeeper on the Tuesday and one on the Wednesday. So as long as you have one good goalkeeper on each day, you're completely fine, and you don't need to, spend all of your budget with a non-limitless team in order to have, let's say, a 5 million goalkeeper and a 6 million one. I think that's far too much money. On the limitless, it is no concern whatsoever, and Sommer is only 4.5 million regardless, so he's a great option here. He had a great start to the season and his Inter Milan career with so many clean sheets, and Inter Milan are right up there in the Serie A table and in the Champions League as well. A solid start, a clean sheet in Matchday 2 against Benfica, and in Matchday 1 a solid draw away from home against Real Sociedad. The second goalkeeper is going to be a very simple one. I don't think many of you will be surprised about this. It is ter Stegen at home to Shakhtar Donetsk, and I think Barcelona have probably the best chance of a clean sheet of any team in Matchday 3. So I think ter Stegen's a great option. In my normal team selection, I've actually got both of these goalkeepers, so I'd be very happy having these two on the Limitless, wildcard, or with a normal squad. I think they are the two best goalkeepers for Matchday 3. Let me know if you disagree, or if there are any other goalkeepers you would recommend for the Tuesday and the Wednesday. That's the only thing you really need to take into account with the Limitless. If you want to go for another team defensively, then that's completely fair enough, because if you do go for Sommer and ter Stegen, you could find yourself with double ups in both Inter Milan and Barcelona defensively, and you might want to diversify your defense a little bit. So I have gone for these two, but of course there are going to be other options as well. But I have to say, I don't see anyone else being better. We're now moving on to the defence, and Denzel Dumfries is the first one on offer, and thus the first double up defensively is formed on this Limitless. You can go for some alternatives elsewhere like Molina away to Celtic, but I've gone for Denzel Dumfries. The attacking potential was there, and even in Matchday 2, he showed some ball recovery potential, which is very encouraging because that's something he typically doesn't do, at least based off last season and also in Matchday 1, but a really solid display in Matchday 2, and one of the only shining lights on my Limitless, and he was in my normal team regardless, but I don't want to talk too much about the Limitless in Matchday 2 and also my team because it just was a bit of a disaster actually. I normally do very well on the Limitless, and typically I average around 100 plus points, but not this time round, unfortunately. Denzel Dumfries, though, is a great option in most match days in the group stages, and apart from Benfica away, I'd be very happy to have him in any other match day. So match days 3, 4, and 6, he is a great option, so long as there's no rotation, of course, in the final match day of the group stages. Then we go to the second defender, and it is a tough fixture. It is the group of death, but with his form, you cannot ignore it. It is Kieran Trippier at home to Borussia Dortmund, and I think Newcastle are the favourites to win this game, and they can keep a clean sheet, and also Trippier has the ball recovery potential as well as the assist threat. So Trippier is a jack of all trades in the heart of the defence, and I know the fixture isn't easy, the group is very difficult, but if I were to go for one Newcastle player in UCL Fantasy, it would undoubtedly be Kieran Trippier. He's also the best option in FPL as well. Then we go to the third defender. He hasn't been particularly great so far this season in UCL Fantasy, but he was one of the highest scoring defenders last season. It is Ruben Dias away to Young Boys. I think Man City will keep a clean sheet here. They of course have Rodri back from suspension in the Premier League and the Carabao Cup, but Rodri didn't miss Matchday 2 against Leipzig, and Man City have won every single game this season with Rodri in the side, and also Conversely, they've also lost every single game without Rodri, so he is integral to that Man City team, and Ruben Dias is a great UCL fantasy option in general with the ball recovery potential. And even though he has been slightly underwhelming this season, if you actually take a look at his points so far, 3 and 4, despite not keeping a clean sheet so far in the Champions League. And I think a clean sheet is definitely coming within the next 2 match days against Young Boys. I'd be very surprised if that wasn't the case, of course. Match day 5 against Leipzig could be a bit difficult from a defensive perspective, but Man City should still win that game. And Man City, I think, will still keep 2 or 3 clean sheets for the remainder of the group stages. Then we go to the 4th defender, where things get very interesting because we do have one of the biggest games in world football happening just 3 days later. That's Joao Cancelo at home to Shakhtar Donetsk, and 3 days later they play Real Madrid in El Clasico. So that could be a bit of a concern, and some Barcelona players could be rotated, or maybe their minutes will be managed. So bear that in mind. But I think Joao Cancelo is a great option at home to Shakhtar Donetsk if he does start. If not, you can go for Jules Koundé instead to go for that double up in Barcelona defensively. But as I said earlier, you might not want to go there, and you might even want an Arsenal defender like Saliba away to Sevilla, Molina away to Celtic. You do have some alternatives here and there. Hakimi at home to AC Milan. But I think Cancelo is a great option, and with these home fixtures, and I have to say Shakhtar Donetsk at home is a fantastic game for Barcelona. You really want to target that fixture and go for at least 2 Barcelona players, and I would go for the double up defensively and then 1 attacker, whether you go for a forward like Joao Felix or a midfielder. It's completely up to you. Bear in mind also that Lewandowski is injured and he's likely going to miss El Clasico as well, so he is a big concern. He's in my own team selection and he's someone I need to get rid of, and also another flop really on the Limitless 2, which kind of summed up the luck of many that play the chip in Matchday 2. The final defender, though, I think we can all agree is a fantastic pick, and I know they haven't been great so far this season, but Napoli and Di Lorenzo definitely offer a lot of potential, and Di Lorenzo is a jack of all trades. He can get ball recoveries, assists, goals. He even assisted against England in the international break, but he also gave away a penalty, so it can go both ways. But Napoli should win this game against Union Berlin, who have really struggled this season. They haven't been too bad in the Champions League, but they've lost both games narrowly to Real Madrid in the last minute and also to Braga in the dying embers of that game as well. So Di Lorenzo is a fantastic option. He might concede, but he can make up for it with his ball recovery and attacking potential. So I have to say this defensive 5 is really solid. You have 2 defensive double-ups as well with Barcelona and Inter Milan, and you also cover teams like Napoli, Newcastle and Manchester City defensively. The second differential of this team is Phil Foden, the first one being Kieran Trippier, and Foden hasn't been particularly great in terms of UCL fantasy over the last year or so, but I remember that campaign when Man City reached the Champions League final and lost to Chelsea. Phil Foden was a fantastic UCL fantasy option, and even in Matchday 2 he got a Man of the Match award, although you could have arguably given it to Alvarez as well. But Foden is a fantastic option here, and I would go for 2 or 3 Man City attackers at the very least, and also a triple up overall. So it really depends on your team structure and what you're trying to build. But I think a double up in Man City offensively is the way to go in Matchday 3. And I think they'll score 3, possibly 4 goals away from home against Young Boys. And whilst Alvarez and Haaland might be even better options overall than Foden, you might also want a striker from another team instead. And I would argue there are more forwards to choose from than midfielders in UCL fantasy, which typically isn't the case in other fantasy games as well. Let me know what you think of the Foden pick. Would you go elsewhere? Do you really back him or trust him to do well? I do, but of course he has been a bit of a pain in FPL over the years, and that could play a part in your judgment too. So we go to the other midfielders, and this will be the easiest pick of the lot. He is probably the most informed player in the world right now, and that is Jude Bellingham. He is facing Braga away, who have scored in all of their games so far this season, but they also leak some chances and goals, and Bellingham has been scoring or assisting in every single game. He was man of the match against Italy over the international break, and he also has been absolutely fantastic for Real Madrid, basically scoring in every single game, including multiple winners in the dying minutes of those matches as well. I think Bellingham is by far the best Real Madrid asset and probably the best midfielder in the game, and how he is still around 7.6 million, I honestly don't know. We already knew when we saw the prices released, I think, 1 or 2 months ago, that Bellingham being priced at 7.5 million was a huge mistake, and As a result, everyone pretty much owns him, and Bellingham and Haaland have the highest ownership of any player in the game. So if you don't have Bellingham already, what are you waiting for? You have to have him, in my opinion. He is probably the only essential player I'd pick in UCL Fantasy in terms of price and what he offers with the points, ball recoveries, goals, assists, man of the match awards, you name it. He is an absolutely fantastic option, and I think you have to have him, unfortunately. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Next up is an injury doubt, but I think he will be available this weekend in the London derby against Chelsea, and that's Bukayo Saka facing Sevilla away. Now, I think Arsenal could struggle here like they did in Matchday 2 against Lens, and Arsenal typically aren't great in away European fixtures, and Sevilla have been pretty poor, but they do have a new manager now, and I would expect a bit of a manager bounce, so I'm not sure if I'd go for 2 or 3 Arsenal players, but on the Limitless, I would go for 1 at least, and I think Saka is the most consistent of the lot, and he's been scoring or assisting in essentially every single game so far this season. He has 5 goals and 5 assists across all competitions, despite getting injured against Lens and not playing ever since that, missing the game against Man City, which Arsenal still went on to win. But Bukayo Saka, for me, is by far the best way of covering Arsenal, offensively or in general. The alternatives would include Martinelli in the forward position and also Martin Odegaard in the midfield. I also like Saliba in the heart of the defence. Raya's a good goalkeeper. I don't think anyone comes close to his consistency in the Arsenal ranks, and he's only 22 years old, so the sky's the limit for him. He's got a lot of potential. The fourth midfielder is another one who showed a lot of potential several years ago at Man City, and that's Leroy Sané facing Galatasaray away for Bayern Munich. He's had a good start to this season, but been a bit frustrating in the international break for Germany, and he can be a bit hot and cold sometimes, which is why a lot of people maybe dislike him as a player or think he hasn't fulfilled his potential, and I do agree he hasn't, but in the Champions League, he's always been a solid option for Bayern Munich and a bit underrated in my opinion, and I would go for at least 1 Bayern Munich attacker. I know Galatasaray picked up a really good result on Matchday 2 at Old Trafford, and they can be a tough team, especially in home matches, but you'd still back Bayern Munich to win that game and to score some goals. I think it could be a very high-scoring one, and I would avoid defenders at all costs from both Bayern Munich and Galatasaray. And in terms of the best attackers to really target in that game, I'd say Harry Kane is first, and then Leroy Sané is second. Musiala is also a great shout, also producing returns in the first 2 match days against Man United and Copenhagen, so he is a great option too, but I would rather have Leroy Sané, who's a bit more explosive, and generally speaking, he's more consistent in terms of goals and assists. The last midfielder that we're going to go for here is a Barcelona one, İlkay Gündoğan, who has been picking up a few assists here and there. His overall goals and assist record isn't great. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think he scored for Barcelona so far, and of course he did really well last season for Man City, and he was integral to winning that treble. But I think Gündoğan at home to Shakhtar Donetsk is a fantastic way of covering that Barcelona attack. Of course, ideally you'd have Lewandowski, but he's injured. Joao Felix is another one you can go for, and I'm not against that. If you want to go there instead, then that's completely fine, and you can look at some alternatives compared to Gündoğan, but I'm really happy with this midfield setup. You've got a balance. You're covering Man City, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, and Barcelona offensively. And despite the fact that most of them are away from home, with the exception of Gündoğan, I still think the fixtures are that good that they can do really well despite being on their travels and not having that home advantage. So if you have other suggestions, of course, in any of these positions, let me know down in the comment section below. But let's now complete the team with the 3 forwards. Despite blanking in 3 consecutive games against Leipzig, Wolves and Arsenal, I still think Erling Haaland is a fantastic UCL fantasy option and almost essential in the next 2 match days against Young Boys. I believe he's one of the best captaincy options, period. And whilst he might not be the best UCL fantasy asset overall, I think that's Bellingham pound for pound, Erling Haaland is still certainly up there and the best goal scorer on the planet. So I think Erling Haaland is a great pick against Young Boys away. And even on the Limitless, if I want to be a bit different, I'd still not go against Erling Haaland, to be honest. And he is a bit of a protective shield. I'm not going to look at effective ownership and stuff like that like we do for FPL, but it's worth considering, of course. And honestly, I think Erling Haaland will outscore most players in the next 2 match days, so I think he's definitely worth an inclusion, and it would be very risky to go without him. Next up is a differential who's just come back from injury. Whilst he hasn't been great on the international stage throughout his career, he is a fantastic player for Real Madrid, and that is Vinicius Jr. away to Braga, and I'm going for 2 Madrid players here. You could also go for a triple up with a defender or even Kepa and goal, but I think a double up in the attack is definitely viable, and that's what I'd want to target, because as good as Real Madrid are, they are a bit suspect defensively, and Bellingham and Vinicius Jr. is still a really good way of covering Los Merengues. So Vinicius Jr. is a bit risky, you could say, but he has been good in terms of goals and assists in the last couple of weeks. Maybe not for Brazil, where he's always struggled a little bit, but once Carlo Ancelotti becomes the Brazil manager, if that's the case next year, I think we could see an improvement on the international stage as well. And as for Real Madrid, he's always very good for them, and in the Champions League, he's one of the best wingers in this competition. The final player is a very simple one. I think you could all tell who it's going to be. Harry Kane away to Galatasaray. And that will make it 3 attacking double-ups for Bayern Munich, Real Madrid and Man City, which you might not be too happy with. You may want to diversify your attack, so you can go for Griezmann or Morata up front against Celtic. And of course, there are other players elsewhere like Gabriel Jesus away to Sevilla. He's got 2 goals so far in the Champions League and an overall good record in this competition. So you don't have to limit yourself to this setup, but this is what I would do if I was on the Limitless this week. Of course, certain positions are up for grabs, even Vinicius Jr. To name one particular example, Ilkay Gundogan, and you can instead go for Joao Felix up front and then go for a completely different midfielder. So you don't have to limit yourself to this exact foundations and limitless squad, but it is a template, and I think it is a very strong side for Matchday 3 and also for Matchday 4, considering it's the same fixtures, only reversed, and you'll have more home ties heading into Matchday 4. So that's also something else you could consider too. In terms of when I'd play the Limitless, if I still had it, I'd still probably look at Matchday 5, but Matchdays 3 and 4 are still absolutely fine, but I would use the Limitless in the group stages, and Matchday 6 is probably a bit too risky in terms of rotation, so I would stick between Matchdays 3 to 5 right now, and my preference would still be Matchday 5. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. When will you be using the Limitless? There's also the chip strategy guide, which is still relevant right now. I discussed the best time to use the Limitless and wildcard chips, and of course I've got the wildcard still in my back pocket, and I'll discuss in my team selection video whether I'll use it, stick with 2 free transfers, or maybe take a -4 hit. The last thing to discuss here is the captaincy, so sort it out by day, and then you have players on the 24th of October and the 25th, next Tuesday and Wednesday. So the way I'd probably go about it is a bit template, but Bellingham would be my captain on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday I'd probably stick to Erling Haaland, and a few other considerations would be a Bayern Munich player like Harry Kane on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday an alternative for the captaincy could be Phil Foden, but to be honest, I think Erling Haaland is the best captaincy option on the Wednesday. Of course, if you disagree, once again, leave it in the comment section down below if you agree, or maybe you want to expand on a certain point I made in this video, or make an entirely different topic or point, then once again, you're welcome to do so in the Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and in the comment section of this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to over 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 21,000 subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, and the UCL Fantasy League, which is the biggest in the world, I believe. So thank you very much to everyone who has joined. I wish you all the best of luck for Matchday 3 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.